So, George, just we're rolling. So, just tell me a little bit about growing up. What was it like? What was your family life like growing up? Tell me a little bit about your parents, your background, stuff like that.
Okay. I am 82 years old, and I was raised a Zionist. I have very little Hebrew Jewish background. I'm a product of the Sunday school environment. Uh, Temple on the Heights in Cleveland, Ohio. Uh, I was born in Buffalo, and I was raised a Zionist.
Gotcha. And tell me a little bit about your parents. Where were they from originally?
I had really wonderful parents, and my parents were Zionists from the get-go. So let's go all the way back into the 1930s. In 1936, my father took milk cows to Palestine from Holland. He lived in Frankfurt. He had been born in the Alsace in Milhouse, and that inevitably enabled him to come to the United States on the French quota. My parents were married in Tel Aviv in 1937. In 1938, and I have a sprig of the wedding bouquet and their pictures of the wedding. In 1938, my father had arranged to ship wood on the idle Nazi ships from Scandinavia to England, whereby Jews depositing their Reichsmark in Germany could withdraw £1,000 in England, and England would let you in if you had that type of money, which $4,800 at that point in time was a great deal of money when you think about the Depression.
Sure.
On November the 10th, Kristallnacht, my father was arrested and taken to Buchenwald concentration camp.
He was living in Holland at the time,
No,
or
no, I'm sorry. My father was in Frankfurt.
In Frankfurt, okay.
In Frankfurt. And my father went with his brother to observe the destruction of Kristallnacht, where 15,000 Jews were arrested in Germany and Austria, and the synagogues and the stores were destroyed.
Right.
My father went and he came upon an apartment house where a Jewish fellow had committed suicide, jumped out. There was a crowd. My father was arrested with his brother, taken to Buchenwald. My father was able to get a message home to my mother, who at that moment was in Budapest visiting her parents. And she came home immediately. She read about the Kristallnacht.
Sure.
She came home immediately. My father was able to get a message to my mother to go to the Gestapo and tell them about the wood transport, what he was doing for Nazi Germany, because the Nazi ships were being boycotted. So she went to the Gestapo. My mother just turned 23, and the Gestapo person said to her to return on Saturday, full well understanding, though my parents were regular street clothes like you and I wear today, but he understood right away that they were Sabbath keepers. So he asked her to come back on Saturday. My mother would later say how foolish she was because she walked. She wouldn't take a taxi or a tram. She got there and he asked her, who should I release, your husband or his brother?
Oh my goodness.
And my mother had the presence of mind to say that his brother is like my brother. He let them both out.
Wow.
My father was successful in real estate in Germany. He had also studied metallurgy, and he packed off his brother immediately to England, but he wouldn't leave Frankfurt until he got his mother out. And my father actually was in concentration camp for 28 days before he was released.
And let's fast forward a little bit.
Wait.
Oh, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, so my father's able to obtain in January a permit from my grandmother to enter Israel, okay, Palestine. The British were rationing those because by that point in time, they were actually trying to keep the Jews out of Palestine. This is well documented.
Sure.
Okay. And my grandmother settled on the outskirts of Mea Shearim because she was real Orthodox. I would say in Jerusalem, that other than if you lived in the old city, in the new city, it's where all the Orthodox lived in that very section.
Sure.
Okay. That distinguishing fact is less well known today because the Orthodox are all over Jerusalem.
Right.
At that point in time, they're in Mea Shearim or living in the old city.
Okay. Right.
So they come to the United States on the French quota. Remember, I mentioned my father was born in the Alsace. The French said that anybody born there between 1870 and 1918, when they took the Alsace back from the Germans had seized it in the Franco-Prussian War of 1870. They said that person could claim French citizenship. That's how they were able to come, because the quota from Germany was 10 years full. In other words, coming to the United States. So the Jewish community, and they packed the silver and linens, and they sent it to Holland, and they came to the United States, and they came with a little bit of money, $5,000, and the Jewish community in New York wanted to get as many of these immigrants out of New York because they'd be vying for jobs with the local residents. My father wound up in Warren, Clarendon, Pennsylvania, where he begins to drive a Pepsi-Cola truck, the first physical labor he'd ever done in his life. I have letters that he's writing back, actually, before he got that job, to the Jewish community here in New York, saying, all I want to do is work. My mother kept everything, okay? Ultimately, they moved. My father's always moving to larger cities. They moved to Buffalo, where I was born in 1944, but in 1939-ish, end of 39, 40, they moved to Buffalo. My father gets drafted, even though he's an immigrant. And he's told, and I have his draft card, he's told that he's 4F. 4F at that time meant you're unfit to serve because he had rheumatic fever and enlarged heart, and he had diabetes, which he didn't know. He was 30 years of age.
Wow.
In Buffalo, he starts to read the New York Times to teach himself English. And he reads, my father was a really seriously bright guy. And he reads and learns that we're sending howitzers and tanks into Russia under Lend-Lease. Remember, the United States did not enter World War II, which started on September 1st, 1939, until Pearl Harbor, December the 7th, 1941.
Right.
So he reads this, and he reads that these barrels, these howards and tanks are malfunctioning because their barrels, when a shell is expelled, it causes friction which heats up the barrel. But in the freezing cold, when the barrel contracts, it cracks. And my father came up with the idea of alloying aluminum with the steel that was being used to make the barrels. He calls it anti-piping compound. He gives it to the United States of America.
Wow.
I have a letter after the war. Someone's looking, interested in buying anti-piping compound from my father. And actually, my father became a millionaire by the early 1950s by creating what's called secondary aluminum from the dross that was being dumped by the aluminum companies and selling it back to the steel companies to alloy with steel. And he was, by that time, in the early 50s, like 1951, tithing, giving 10% of his income to the labor union, the Histadrut, in Israel.
Interesting. What a wild piece of American history, though, this development of the piping compound.
Right. And but my father wanted to live near his factory in Cleveland, which was on the west side near Parma, Ohio, where there was this Cadillac tank plant. The industrial heart of Cleveland was what was called the Flats. there were steel mills, aluminum, whatever. And my father's created a plant there, and he wanted to be able to get to it quickly. So I lived on the west side. I was the only Jewish kid in my neighborhood. And although I hung out with all the kids that went to Catholic school, I was called Christ killer and urinated on,
Wow.
which made me very antithetic, so to speak, to Christianity, which as a factor dominated much of my life.
Interesting.
Yeah. My father always wanted to move to New York, but we stayed in Cleveland. Actually, when I was 15, we moved to the east side of Cleveland, Shaker Heights, which had a very big Jewish community at that time, Cleveland Heights, Shaker Heights. And my father wanted to move to New York, but my mother said, no, let him finish high school in Cleveland. So I applied to Dartmouth College. I was accepted, and my parents moved to New York. And
okay.
So, but I stayed in close touch with my friends from Cleveland, and that had a big impact on me because many years later, with the smartest fellow in my class, Bill Ginsberg, whose father in 1968 was the head of the United Jewish Appeal for the United States and raised $250 million, which, if you think of $250 million in 1968 after the 67 war, was billions of dollars in terms of purchasing power. Bill became my business partner. We applied for cellular telephone licenses when that became a possibility in 1981, and we were awarded licenses in the state of Ohio. We ultimately acquired the license for Puerto Rico, and we ultimately won the license with a group of others, but we led the effort for all of Italy. And then at the same time, we were building out the cable and telephone systems in England, where that was the only country in the world where you could have a cable license and offer telephone service. And about that time, in mid-90s, I started reading a magazine called Biblical Archaeology Review. Now, that was mid-90s. And that's where I learned that archaeology confirmed the Bible. That changed my life forever. Okay. And in about 99, 2000, we started offering high-speed internet access as a bundle with regard to telephone and cable services in England. And that's how I got exposed to the internet. As a matter of fact, I was even quoted at the Chase Manhattan conference saying, the internet in the future in 1999 will be about delivering video. The only problem is I didn't do it. Okay. I could have done Netflix if I were smart, but I was an idiot. Anyhow.
We're going to come back to that in a little bit and some of my questions.
Okay. I lost the company to the high yield crisis in 2002. We ran up 23 billion in debt. The thing I failed to mention was that in the late 90s, I've been to Jerusalem 50 times, and I went outside the King David Hotel, and there was a shop called Biblical Antiquities. And in the window, there were 3 oil lamps. One said oil lamp Middle Bronze Age, one said oil lamp Late Bronze Age, one said oil lamp Iron Age 1. And I had no idea what those periods were. I should have known, but I didn't. And I walked in and I said, well, what are those time periods? Well, Middle Bronze Age is 2200 to 1500, and Late Bronze Age is 1500 to 1200, and Iron Age 1 is 1200 to 1000. I said, wait a second. From reading Bar, I knew that Middle Bronze Age was Abraham, which we tend to think of as around 1800 to 2000. Late Bronze Age would have to be Moses.
Right.
And Iron Age 1 would have to be King David. And I said, what was that? He said to me, I said, well, that's fascinating. And I said to him, what's that little one over there? He said, Hasmonaim. Then the Maccabees. I said, you're telling me with 4 oil lamps I can tell the story of the Jewish people?
Wow.
And this fellow kept saying to me, oh, you have to meet my uncle Shlomo Elkan. He's one of the foremost collectors of archaeology in the Bible. And I did, and finally, when I'm in London at that time, I called this fellow in Jerusalem. Is your uncle in London? Because he had told me his uncle had made hundreds of millions of dollars by selling diamonds to the Arabs. He had a shop at the Hilton Hotel. It's still in London as a shop, not at the Hilton, Messiah Jewels. And I went into his apartment, which you told me the King of Jordan had given him. That's a good story. But everything Shlomo said actually is true. It was
Right.
right near the U.S. Embassy at that time. And I walked in, and there's all archaeological objects in cases on the walls, including probably 50%, like 40. There's these bottles that from the glass bottles, Byzantine period, let's say around 500, with menorahs on them. They're
Right.
exceptionally rare. And he had acquired the majority of those. And I came back to the United States, and I decided I wanted to film him. I knew what the high-speed internet was because we were very successful with it. And I came back to the United States. I met a very famous man. I hardly knew him. I started telling him the story. He actually was from Wall Street, but he was at that time president of Tel Aviv University. And I told him what had happened. I told him what happened. He told me we should go meet this fellow, Andrew Goldberg. Andrew Goldberg has made a lot of videos about the Jewish people for PBS, Two Cats production. And I went, I met him, and he said, do you want to film this in high definition? I said, absolutely, it's the future. And he said, well, the equipment's too large to carry over. We'll rent it in Israel. I get to Shlomo's apartment, and the equipment is set up, and there's a young man there with a kippah, and he introduces, says, I'm one of the partners in the company that owns equipment. Basically, he's there to make certain that the Americans don't break the
So you
equipment.
don't break anything, right?
The first day he came with an analog camera. The second day came with a 6 megapixel digital camera.
Was this about just to get
This
a
is, hmm?
what year was this just to get a frame of
This
reference?
is it's about, this is 2003, 4, something like that.
Okay, okay.
Shlomo would go to the vault, pull out something, which I normally have a coin in my hand, and he put it in my hand, and Ardon would take a picture. And with the digital camera, I had an epiphany. I saw that you could capture a three-dimensional object. You couldn't scan it, but you could capture a three-dimensional object. And I knew then what I wanted to do. On that same trip, actually, I went to the Ben-Zvi Institute, which was named after the second president of Israel, Yitzhak Ben-Zvi, and it's all about the Sephardim Mizrahis. Okay. And I asked for a color picture of a letter that I'd seen in one book. I buy picture books of Shabtai Tzvi, the false Messiah, from about 1650. And this document that they had, the Sultan calls him in and says, if you're the Messiah, I'm going to cut off your head and you'll return. Shabtai converts to Islam.
Right. In Turkey.
Paper says, Shabtai Muhammad Tzvi. And that's the story. Wow. So the librarian gives me a terrible Xerox picture. And I say, well, do you do much digitization here? She says, yes. I have a book of poetry from India or Yemen. Someone at Cornell wants to write a paper about it. And I scan on my scanner a few pages a day. I said, could I bring my associate here? The next day, Ardon comes from Renana near Tel Aviv, and he brings a PC, a camera, and some lights, all in a knapsack. He sets it up. 30 minutes later, that book is digitized. They go to the vault. They pull out what I wanted. Ardon digitizes it 10 nanoseconds, and someone says, we own the Aleppo Codex. Would you like to digitize it?
Wow.
I said, absolutely. They pull out the Isaiah scroll. Ardon digitizes it. And that was it. We were on our way, which led ultimately doing the Mishnah Torah signed by Maimonides at Oxford, doing many exhibits at the Israel Museum. Doing tens of thousands of Kairoganisa fragments here in New York and at Oxford, and even doing Beethoven recently. But it's gone on and on. Now, about the same time, I met some professors from New York University, particularly Larry Schiffman, who was a very famous Dead Sea Scroll scholar, one of the leading lights in that area. And because I had had no Jewish education, and because I believed in the internet, I wanted to create a website that was then named Center for Online Judaic Studies. And for a few years, we started to build this site, Cojus at cojs.com. And today, we've had since then 5 million hits. We get 400,000 annually. But what's interesting is the annual view. Each viewing is 6 minutes. No website gets that.
Right.
When we then subsequently launched the Great Isaiah Scroll with Google. Google came to me and said, we'd like to put the Great Isaiah Scroll on the web. And we did that with the Israel Museum. And we're just redoing it right now as we speak. And we're embedding the archaeology in it, which is going to be a phenomena. And we just redid the Aleppo Codex. Right. And we also recently did the Diaries of Theodor Herzl.
Right.
Okay.
Good. So, I'm going to pause you for a second, George. We're going to come to your
I want to come to you now.
But I have a bunch of questions to kind of unpack.
Okay.
How you became who you are. Okay. And so some of it, and touch on a lot of what you've already mentioned. I think your parents were a tremendous influence
They were it.
On shaping you. What was a value or some values that they implanted in you when you were young that just never left, are just so deep in you, that are the core of who you are?
I can cite a specific instant. Obviously, generally, they imbued in me a love of Israel.
Sure.
Okay, that's one. But perhaps I shouldn't say there's nothing ahead of the love for Israel, but there was a very famous story that I grew up with. My father was in the real estate business in Frankfurt. A non-Jewish person came to my father. My father was a real estate broker and said he wanted to buy a property through my father. My father said, don't do it, you're going to lose money. The man bought the property, came to my father, and wanted to give my father a commission. And my father wouldn't take it. Morality, the utmost morality, is what my father and my mother taught me. And I can't say that I've been totally a moral person, but I try as hard as I can to be a moral person.
Wow.
And tzedakah. They were always helping others. Remember, my father was tithing to the Histrodut. Okay? Right. So that's what I learned from my parents. And I guess entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm. Three tremendous lessons. Maybe either could be your parents or beyond your parents. What relationship through your whole life has most influenced your Jewish identity today that you have?
Well, I wouldn't call it a relationship. I would call it a fact.
Okay.
When I learned that you could digitize information, you can't scan the Great Isaiah Scroll, you break it, right? You can't, or the Aleppo Codex, you can't put a rare document on a scanner. You're taking enormous risks. But the digital photography that Ardon invented in front of my eyes really changed the world. So knowing about the internet, because I was quite aware, I'm actually not very good in technology, as you know, but
you do pretty good, George. I don't know.
But I think I have a sense, not always good, of for example, I missed the iPhone, though I was in the cellular telephone business. I didn't understand internet on the phone, but I basically have a sense of what the average person's interested in.
Hmm.
Okay, so I recently presented. So no, I'll tell you. So I recently presented all the information that I've told you about archaeology, about anti-Semitism, at a church group, and they filmed me. I think I told you about that
Yeah,
for two
absolutely.
hours. 1 hour on archaeology and the Bible, 1 hour on anti-Semitism. Okay. At the end, they got up and clapping and cheering and blessing me. I mean, they're Zionistic group of people, but they got 1,200 churches in 84 countries, and they're going to disseminate this information.
That's wild. And through this technology of taking something that's inaccessible to most people and putting it in their hands through this technology.
Let me say this to you. It's I met a person very bright, born in Israel. I'd say he's religious or observant. I don't know if he's a Sabbath observer. And I told him about the Tel Dan Stela, the proof of King David, that was found in 30 years ago in 1993. He never heard about it.
Right.
Okay. I cannot begin to tell you how many people have no idea that the proof of King David went from faith to fact in 1993. It was here at the Metropolitan Museum, but it was hidden behind a door.
And that
Okay.
made it real in 1990.
So fast forward, I got into all this digitization, uh, and a couple years ago, about the time that we met. Oh yes, along the way, I wound up at the city of David at the point in time where they found the pool of Siloam, and by accident, and I actually then took Michael Douglas there because Michael Douglas has put me in some of his films,
Right.
and went there with him for his son's bar mitzvah, and we started creating this site with a woman named Anna Marina
Kreisman.
Kreisman. Yes, Anna Marina Kreisman. Anna Marina Batzion Kreisman. Right, and we're already now in about the 1600s. She just wrote a marvelous 10-page piece on the Kabbalah. I mean, my God, you got to read this thing. You would understand it, but I mean, it was interesting, the whole derivation. She points out that it begins with King David as mentioned in Chronicles. Okay. And then et cetera, et cetera. So, and to me, that's what this is all about. So actually my mission today is to reach as many educators as possible.
Good. Fantastic. I want to bring you back to
Yeah.
something you mentioned, the missed boat of Netflix and iPhone.
Yeah.
You know, I'm kind of curious, like what failure of yours, either I would say, are you most proud of, or that maybe taught you the most?
Well, I think losing the cable company, getting too leveraged, borrowing too much money
Mhm.
will forever haunt me. I took my eye off the ball. I
Mhm.
let other people run the company, and it was the dot-com boom, and bandwidth, and whatever you could imagine. Uh, that was the vogue, and I was resting on my laurels. I was 56 years old, and I let other people do it, and I should not have taken my eye off the ball.
And how did that change how you kind of how you move forward? Because from then until now, you've also accomplished so much. So how did you use that to propel you forward in other ways?
I was depressed. I was depressed for many years, and I actually went out of my way to always tell people of my failure.
Mhm.
Uh, and when you say, what am I most proud of? Well, I think probably I need to say, like most parents would say, but I would say this, that my children are moral.
Mhm.
Okay. They're moral. and they never did drugs. Well, my daughter might have done a little bit, but
We won't tell anybody. We won't tell.
but I don't. They didn't do drugs. They don't do drugs. Um, I think I'm most proud of is really that I had my parents. They everything I do is nothing but an extension of who they were. They were. My
Mhm.
father was a Zionist. My father was an entrepreneur. My father helped the USA. It goes on and on and on. So I'm not proud of it. I think I was blessed.
Right.
Okay, and I mean, beginning I was one of the first 25 people my company to be awarded cellular telephone license in the United States. But that's so far long ago. That's the early 80s. We're talking 40 years ago. You
Right.
know, so you know, I don't know what to say.
No, that's great. And kind of in that reflective mode, it's a two-parter here, but what's something you miss about being young, and what's something you've come to appreciate as you've, I don't know, call it grown up, grown older, gained experiences?
Well, I've learned a lot about my failings. I've learned a lot about my weaknesses. Um, I've been fortunate I mentioned 5 million views for uh, Kojus, but I co-funded the development of more than 30 videos at the City of David, which had 11 million views. Those are the type of things I guess I'm proud of. But it's still just an extension of my parents.
Yeah. And is there something of your youth that you miss?
Well, um,
Because you still play tennis like a young guy. I know that.
well, not quite. Yeah, I'm playing tennis 3 times a week, and I'm working out, but I'm feeling the age now,
Mhm.
very noticeably, uh, at 82, and I'm having terrible uh, naming problems.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm definitely sliding. I can see it physically in me. Uh, so how can I complain? You know, I I've been blessed, and no complaints.
Um, what's something you're still curious about? What's something you'd still want to learn about?
I am coming. I have some projects that I'm working on. So I'm not curious. I have a lot of data. It's about assembling them. One is really going to be people are going to be aghast at, and that is that I'm creating a piece all based on data that the English murdered 1 million Jews during World War II.
Hmm.
And Winston Churchill was a really, really bad guy. And everybody loves Winston Churchill. I have all documented British documents and Churchill documents. Okay. I've searched numerous books for footnotes. This is, I'm going to be very proud of this one.
That's where your energy is right now, is pushing that out there.
Absolutely.
Would you say that there's a quote, a teaching, a text, an idea that's kind of guided you through your whole life?
Sure. It's Hillel. I'm going to paraphrase it.
Sure.
If I am not for me, who will be? If I am not for others, who am I?
What's your take? Why is that such a guiding principle for you?
Well, you have to take care of yourself, but in addition to that, you have to take care of others. Others can be through food, it can be through knowledge, it can be through projects, but that's that.
So the second time we met, I came to your office, and you could take the Chabad rabbi out of Brooklyn, but you can't take or whatever the phrase is. I asked if we could put tefillin on together.
Yeah.
And you told me you did it for the whole year that you were saying Kaddish for your father, but that was it. I'm curious if you could kind of talk a little bit about like how do you feel spiritual? How do you feel the idea of God, and what stretched you spiritually? What's challenged you spiritually?
A lot of people ask me that. I'm asked that all the time, given all the digitization I've done and whatever. Um, I'm going to misquote Einstein.
Okay,
I could get the quote. It's right around the corner here someplace.
ballpark it. It's okay.
Okay. Einstein said, I believe in the God of Spinoza, that there is a God, but I don't believe it's involved in my life. God is involved in my life. Okay.
Mhm.
Um, so that's what I believe. Okay. I cannot say I'm a spiritual person. I have these discussions a lot,
Sure.
even with my trainer, Mitch, who is very spiritual.
Interesting.
And uh, you know, what I'll tell you what bothers me. What bothers me are people who lay tefillin, but they're not moral in their daily life.
Mhm.
That means they think it's okay to take advantage of other people. I have, I think I have rarely, if ever, maybe I did it somehow, somewhere, thought that taking advantage of another person was good. So all my companies were built upon giving value to the consumer, cellular service, reasonable prices, cable service, bundled, etc., in at affordable rates. Um, so there's tens of millions of people using the services of the companies I created. So when people are religious and not what I would call moral, maybe I'm, then I would say I have a problem with that.
Yeah. Okay. There's a long conversation we could have. I'd be interested to have it at some point, but thinking, that they're either also works in progress, or how does it work the opposite way? Like somebody who operates morally amongst fellow men, but has their challenges operating well, vertically with God. Like, is it a similar scale or is it a different metric for you? There's no right answer. I'm asking you your opinion.
At least all you have to do is follow the Ten Commandments. You know, I mean, we all should try to. I
Sure.
mean, but you know, when you take care of other people, wait a second. When you take care of other people, you're taking care of God's desires, God's wishes, God's whole thoughts, or whatever it is. I mean, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
In a lot of ways, sure.
But
I think so.
but I will admit, because I told you I've done things that could be considered against the Ten Commandments. I've come to really understand that humanism, or being human, no one's born with perfection. If
Right.
they were born with perfection, they'd be Messiah, right? So we all fail in some way. Okay, that's just about being human. And what I wouldn't call fail, and you call it fail, or they did something that they wish they hadn't done, or something like that. But that's just being human.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that deeply, deeply. I mean, people mess up in all kinds of ways, and
Sure.
Um, what do you do when you feel particularly disconnected from Judaism, from the community, from the concept of God? How do you manage that feeling of disconnect?
Um, well, let me put it this way. I'm 24 by 7 or 7 by 24 when I when the energy is there to work on doing anything I can with regard to the state of Israel and the Jewish people.
Sure.
That's all I do.
And you're surrounded by it. I can attest your home is filled with artifacts of the Jewish people.
Yeah.
So you don't feel disconnected. It's an immersive experience for you.
Why?
So you don't feel disconnected. It's immersive for you all the time.
Oh, that's why I have all these things and
Right.
papers all around the place because I'm always working one thing or another.
Right. Uh, I always,
I, I tell you one thing is I get the greatest feeling. I go, oh wow, I just found some fact that I didn't know or that I can use in terms of developing this whole story about our people.
yeah. Well, I think, for me, coming into your home, it was this meeting of this wild experience. When you look down in your home, you see all these artifacts of the Jewish people, and you look out and you see the expanse of the modernity of Manhattan, which is also, I mean, you know, at least for me, New York and the Jews at this point are totally interwoven, and so getting the past and the present, and to a certain degree looking into the future by looking out, is really powerful. To really so that you live with that every day. I don't know if you appreciate it the same way I do because you see it
No,
every
no,
day.
no, no, I'm aware of it every day. I'm aware of how blessed I am. I love looking at oil lamps with menorahs or other things. I love giving people, particularly Christian people, uh, the widow's mite, the pruta from Alexander Janaeus, and yeah, I like educating people.
Right. Well, so in the name of education, what's a question about Judaism or faith or spirituality that has remained unanswered for you? You haven't discovered the answer to yet.
I haven't discovered how to disseminate it.
Hmm.
That is the yearning in me. That's the thing that I feel most terrible about.
And kind of sticking in this theme of Judaism and the Jewish community, what does it mean for you to be a part of the Jewish people?
Uh, it's a blessing and a curse. Uh,
What's the
anti,
curse? What's the curse part?
the curse is anti-Semitism, and you see that more and more across the country, and you see it more and more of people of color, and you see it, and they don't know when people don't want to know that the Arabs been attacking Israel for 100 years and murdering Jews. Einstein even wrote about the Hebron massacre.
Right.
Okay, and yet, and and Einstein actually wrote in 1948 that he feared that if there were a problem in the economy in the United States, there would be anti-Semitism.
Hmm. And what's the blessing?
The blessing is that I have genes that came came down through my parents. They probably got them from Moses. They were probably somehow connected being in the desert.
Sure.
And what I've been able to do in my modest way.
So, this is kind of a gimme question for you, but it's an
Yeah.
important question. 100 years from now,
Huh.
what do you hope the Jewish people have managed to preserve?
I beg your pardon. What?
In a
100
hundred
years.
years from now, what do you hope that the Jewish people have managed to preserve?
Um, their lineage, their history, uh, what they've contributed to the world. A billion people versus 10 million in Israel, 8 million of whom are Jews. And uh, I hope that we can preserve that.
Yeah. Looking forward, in the future, what gives you hope about the future?
I I don't have any hope. I only hope that we can beat back anti-Semitism.
Mhm. Okay. Wind it down with just a couple more questions
Yeah.
here, but um, what responsibility do you think that older generations have to the younger ones? People that have had these experiences, that have amassed knowledge. What responsibility do you have to my children's generation?
Um, well, I think I have a different question, different answer.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. It bothers me that billionaires, I mean billionaires, very few of which I'm going to take Bob Kraft as the exception, who set up a $200 million fund to fight anti-Semitism. Um, it bothers me that these people with so much money think if they give $1 million to the United Jewish Appeal or something, they've done something phenomenal. I happen to know that the cost of really disseminating education, not to, so much is focused on the religious community and the day schools, that it has to be for the 90% of the kids who never went to day school. And with um, with some very small amounts of money, you could have a tremendous impact. That also depends upon the people who are administering that money, which is another problem. But they don't try. So here you have Michael Dell. I know he's acting in the Jewish community in Austin. He sets up $3 billion so that children can get these Trump funds when they're born or whatever. If
Right.
they just imagine if you put $100 million into Jewish ed or $10 million into Jewish ed, impact it could have.
So pony up and use it responsibly.
Yeah, but no, pony up and get involved. The genius that enabled you to make this money is not about giving it to some administrator.
Mm.
It's about you putting part of your time into it. And when you're in your 60s and 70s and even earlier, boy, you've made enough wealth and you have enough time that you can do it if you want to.
Wow, that's really powerful. Two last questions for you, and this has been so enlightening for me. Uh, what's the question or a question that you wish people would ask you more often?
Um, where can I find information? Um, yeah,
And
how can I get involved? Not with me. It's about you getting involved by you telling other people.
how do I get it out there?
Yeah,
How do I use what you've put out there to get out there more?
yeah.
Yeah. And if, we're making a kind of a compendium of all these interviews, who would be somebody you would want to hear? That you'd want to read their interview or listen to their interview?
Not really anyone,
Yeah.
because I'm nothing but an assembler of data. That's all I am. Okay, that's how I view myself. All my friends are smarter than me. Okay, I swear to you. And when I listen to them talk, I like just to listen. Uh, uh, yeah. So
Well, so you're a listener as much as you're a sharer, you're a listener. What resonates with you about what they share?
talking about anything, we could be talking about books or science or something, but their understanding, their grasp, and their way to put it together, to assemble it, the way they look at it, I believe is superior to mine. My whole life has been just about learning there's going to be cellular telephone licenses and being one of the 25 companies to apply, or learning that you can offer cable and telephone service in the United Kingdom, the only place in the world. You know, we're waiting for that moment when it took 7 years when I first thought about it for Italy to award cellular licenses. But when that moment came, to pounce on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because my parents took me to Italy when I was 11 to see the Arch of Titus in the Colosseum.
Okay, but millions of people have seen the Arch of Titus at the Colosseum. Only 25 got cellular licenses.
Well, that's not that was about Italy, applying for a license in Italy. There
Mhm.
were only a few of us, anyhow, um, who applied, interestingly enough.
Right.
Um,
So there's something special there, though. Something
hmm,
that you it, my analysis to a degree, you're talking about your friends that are also smart and you listen. As a kid, you go to Italy and you take in. And as much as you're a supplier of educational materials, you're a sponge of soaking it all up to be able to put it back out there.
well, I guess it got that from my parents.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I really, really appreciate you sharing this and spending the time with me. And it's enlightening. It's inspiring. As much as you're going to rebuff me saying that, it's enlightening and inspiring. So thank you.
Yeah, okay, I can understand that, you know, and of course, I guess my wish is that you find a way to carry this forward.